I want to thank every one of our Torah and Haftarah laners, especially the intrepid members of our High Holy Day laning team who have been my partners in imagining and bringing to life the words of our sacred text in this totally new way. And to every single one of you who gather with us today, Shana Tova, my dear friends. And may the turning of this new year bring with it blessings of happiness, of peace, sustaining each of us and those we love in body and in spirit. But I must admit honestly that these words seem as tenuous as spider's silk as I share them with an empty sanctuary again this year. We are surrounded by innumerable blessings that make our lives full, not the least of which is the frankly miraculous ability for me to speak and share these words with you today, all around the globe, instantaneously and in high definition. I believe and give thanks with all my heart that we are in a better place this year than the one before, and that happiness and a world of goodness lay ahead for us no matter the challenges we face. But these Yamim Noraim, these days of awe and trembling, feel raw and urgent this year. And I don't want to understate or ignore that fact. Last year, in my Drashah about the stories of our mothers, Sarah, Hagar, and Hannah, I asked a question that seems even more relevant today. The stories we shared this morning, the stories we tell every new year, are complicated, painful stories. Why these stories, out of all the possible stories that Torah has to offer us as we begin the journey of a new year together? Why, on the second day of Rosh Hashanah, as we step into the brand new days of a new year, why on earth do we always tell the story of the Akedah, the binding of Isaac? Because truthfully, my friends, I am rarely in a mood to read this story. And it is certainly not the way that I want to start this year. I've heard it described as a horror story, a traumatic tale of a father's willingness to butcher his own son on the altar of his passions. It's a story of graphic violence told matter-of-factly. While it doesn't end with human bloodshed, it isn't a happy ending either. Its scenes are seared into our minds, and we watch in horror and suspense as the tale unfolds. Abraham hears God's call. Abraham, Hineni, here I am. Take your son, your favorite, your beloved Isaac, and go to the land of Moriah and offer him there as a burnt sacrifice. And without a word, Abraham wakes up early the next morning, takes Isaac, and sets out to complete this most grotesque of commands. What are you doing? We want to scream, as readers and listeners of this story have for generations. Our commentators, ancient and modern, try to calm our fears. It's only a test. God would never make Abraham go through with such a murderous task. Look at him, a paragon of faith. He knows God will protect him and his son and the promise that was made to them. But with every step on this fateful journey, our every human instinct continues to cry that this is wrong. This is antithetical to everything we know. Where is the Abraham of only a few chapters earlier, when God was poised to level cities of evildoers who spoke up on behalf of total strangers saying, "Will you sweep the innocent away with the guilty? Far be it for you to do such a thing. Shall not the judge of all the earth deal justly? Far be it for you." Here, the only words he has to say are a robotic Hineni to both his God and his only remaining child. And when Isaac asks him directly, "Father, where is the sheep for the burnt offering?" Abraham responds with no betrayal of emotion. "God will see to the offering, my son. And this is the last time that Abraham and Isaac will ever speak." There are those that say that this is the ultimate test of faith, that we should enter our new year with a similar and singular obedience. We must trust, even when we willingly raise the knife, that God never desires the sacrifice of any person for our faith. Our hand will ultimately be stayed. It's all part of a grand plan. But there are others who say that this was a test and Abraham failed. He didn't protest, even though he knew this request was monstrously wrong. On that altar, he not only sacrificed his relationship with his son, he sacrificed his relationship with God by not demonstrating that he could keep his own moral compass aligned. Notably, it's not God who calls out to Abraham and stops his hand. It's an angel, a messenger of God. God and Abraham never speak again either, not all the remaining days of his life. Abraham knows much blessing, but never again that closeness with God. I have to question, did Abraham really know all that he placed for sacrifice on that altar? If he had known, would he have chosen the same? Kierkegaard, the great existential philosopher, used this story as the opening of his monumental work, Fear and Trembling. It begins with a fable. Once upon a time, there was a man who as a child heard that beautiful story of how God tempted Abraham and how Abraham withstood temptation, kept the faith. But the man rereads it as an adult and realizes its horror. He reads it again and again, and the more he reads it, the less he understands it. This might be us this year, rereading this tale to the point of incomprehension and outrage. But maybe that's part of the point. To not let the sing-song of the beautifully chanted Hebrew lull us into the meaning of the words sliding by. Maybe the point of these stories is to provoke this kind of authentic outrage. The more we read this story, the further from it we get. Maybe there's a value in unknowing in this way. But what are we, the inheritors and the witnesses of this story, meant to take from its retelling, especially on the holiest of days? Here we stand, literally or figuratively, in shul once again, to take part in the sacred communal exercise of naming and welcoming a new year together as a Jewish community, and we can't look away. Like Abraham, this year especially, we find ourselves in our own hineni moments. We may feel as if we too are being tested. We don't know how this moment in time will transform the future. What we do know, unquestionably, is that this moment has upended what we expected for our lives. The story ends with a ram's horns entangled in a thicket, and it is offered as sacrifice in place of Isaac. He and we are spared. So what does that ram's horn call us to hear this year? What catches my ear in a whisper are the places where love is present and love is absent in this story. This was noticed by my teacher of Hebrew literature, Dr. Wendy Zierler, as a feminist commentary submitted to the incredible Akedah project. Dr. Zierler points out that the story of the Akedah is actually the very first time that the word love is used in the whole Torah. It's in the way God describes Isaac. Kachna et bincha et yechidcha asher ahavta et Yitzchak. Take your son, your favorite one, the one you love, Isaac. Love begins this story, but it never recurs. In fact, when the angel cries out to Abraham to stop him from going through with the sacrifice, this formula is repeated but heartbreakingly amended. Now I know that you fear God, since you have not withheld your son, your favored one, from me. Your son, your favorite one, but not the one you love. Abraham has demonstrated that he fears God, Yirat Adonai, appropriate for these days of awe and holy fear, the Yamim Noraim. But the cost is that he has lost all the love in his life, his beloved son, the close and loving relationship he had with God. And Abraham loses his wife, Sarah, as a result of this episode. She is nowhere to be found in this story, but Bereshit Rabbah suggests that the reason the very next parasha is that of Sarah's death is because she heard what Abraham planned to do on the mountain, and she died of a broken heart. And yet, love doesn't entirely disappear from our biblical text, and neither does Sarah. The two are beautifully intertwined. The next time we see the verb ahav, love, in the Torah is the story of finding Isaac's wife, Rivka. It's important to notice that this is not an act that Abraham undertakes himself. He is detached, he's severed, both from his son, even as he acts for his welfare, and from God. Though God's will is mentioned, it is not directly imparted to Abraham. When Isaac meets Rivka after her long journey to marry him, he brings her to his mother Sarah's tent, and we read, he loved her. Perhaps it is the balance and the warning of love and awe that we are meant to carry with us from this story on these particular Yamim Noraim. In our Musaf service today, we beg God to act for us with favor because of Zichud Avot, the honor and the merit and the sacrifices of our ancestors who cemented our covenant as the Jewish people, like Abraham. But we also pray that God will consider us with love, kirachem av al banim, with the compassion of a parent towards their child, completely unlike Abraham. On Rosh Hashanah, we create a new reality. It is an awesome and God-like power to say, at this moment, I decide to begin. We don't pretend that we are emerging out of nothing. We don't discard the experiences that have made us who we are up to this point. Like Abraham and like Isaac, we are emerging from experiences that have shaped us, perhaps that have scarred us. But will we have the audacity to say, I don't have to just continue with what I've always done. This is my time to choose. Which habits will I break, and which habits will I begin? Which relationships will I mend, and which relationships will I end? As a human being, I hold within me the capacity to change. How will I choose the path going forward? Let us choose love, as Isaac did even when he walked in twilight shadows. We must actively choose to be open to discovering love in many ways, and to not let our experience of sacrifice diminish our capacity to feel and to share love. We must hear this story once again this year, whether we wish to be confronted by its examples or not. Let it prepare us for the tests that are certain to come our way, to which we must respond, Hineni, here I am. Let it caution us that our actions, even our most faithful and inspired, come with costs that we must consider if they are too great to bear. Let it teach us that in every moment, even the ones where we think we have no choice, we can let love play a role in how we answer. I pray that we may all be blessed with the opportunity to live through more opportunities for fear and for awe, and to respond to them with love. Shana Tova Umetuka.